she thinks so. Good afternoon and welcome to AM Network Presents Summary Judgment.
Did you get up? Wait, hold on. Good afternoon and welcome to American News Network's Summary Judgment Show. We're transmitting live from our media center in Harwinton, Connecticut. And Rachel's trying to put her earphone in her ear and got caught with the camera coming on.
Well, the new social media director is encouraging me to wear
an
ear thing, but
she is prompt.
But it irritates me, and I'm afraid people can see it. But anyway, I'm attorney Rachel Baird, and
so is it in your ear now?
No, and this is my co-host Ed Peruta. We're here for a show that we attempt to do weekly, and sometimes we do. We're starting early today because Ed is here, and we want to catch him at his strongest and most vigorous moments. So we apologize for anybody that plans on watching us live at noon on Saturdays, but you have to remain a little flexible with us during this time. Probably only going to be on the air for an hour too. We're shooting for an hour today, so that'll be
let me tell you,
11:13 Eastern time to 12:13 Eastern time. Go ahead.
Joshua down in Philadelphia has sent in a clip. Mm-hmm. Okay, and North Georgia has sent in a clip, but I can't. It's a password thing.
Okay.
He sent in a clip that I can't get to it right now on Dropbox.
I can probably help you with that.
Well, it's on the Media Center Dropbox. Mm-hmm. Do you have the ability to get into that?
I do.
Where's your laptop?
Well, not right now. We're in the middle of a show.
Well,
Listen.
then I go. You will not be seeing North Georgia during the show. You may be able to see it, but what I'm saying is,
well, I'll put it this way.
Joshua is. It's not going to work.
I'll put it this way, Ed. If you carry your weight and talk about some of the subjects, I will look up this video on media. Okay. We're preparing for next week's big 30th year anniversary of American News and Information Services, incorporated on June 12th, 1989. Just celebrated 30 years in June of this year. We were going to put together a big banquet and everything, but life got in the way.
You know something?
What?
Go ahead.
But life got in the way, so now what we're going to do at the VFW in Rocky Hill, we're going to do a live show there from 3 to 6. We may not be on for that entire period of time. We may be on for a little while, then go off and come on. But from 3 to 6, we'll be at the VFW in Rocky Hill.
I would like to do a live show from the VFW in Rocky Hill.
We're going to do that. It's in the works.
We've
already rented the room.
Goes, my transplant screwed the pooch.
Well, that's okay. This is the first year, and we're getting off and running. So we're going to have a table at the front where Ed and I are going to sit. Rich Burgess from Connecticut Carey has pretty much committed. I mean, we know that things come up, but we hope he'll be there, and he's indicated he plans to be there. I'm thinking Matt Tiska, our former co-host, may be able to come down from New Hampshire, retired Lieutenant Colonel Matt Tiska. And we may have some other just pop-in guests, unannounced guests, and we're gonna have chairs in the room, and people can sit there, and we'll have a live studio audience. And I think it's going to be a great experiment. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I have come up with 10 subjects that we're going to discuss that day, subjects that have been the main core of our show for the past 5 years. Okay, and this is in no particular order. What I'm going to do is I'm going to name all these subjects, Ed. And then we're going to go through them, and maybe you can elaborate or add on to just the bare, title of the area. So,
go ahead.
Hartford Civilian Review Board.
Screwed up.
Park and Kelsey Street.
Hartford Civilian Review Board. When we went, they did not know what they were doing. And there was a chairman who did not know what he was doing.
But I'm just going to list them all now, and then we're going to go back. Okay. You can't do that. Park and Kelsey Street. Seizing guns without a warrant. J.C. Playford's case in San Diego. The Naugatuck case involving the body-worn cameras here in Connecticut. Video recording trials here in Connecticut and in general. Joe Kaminsky's case out in Coventry. FOIA in Connecticut, Freedom of Information Act in Connecticut. Trump's election, that should be number one, by the way. But like I said, these are in no particular order of importance. But Trump's election was a big event on this show. And the Veterans Administration. Rich Burgess, the head of Connecticut Carey, added Walmart's policy on not selling guns or ammunition anymore and banning open carry in retail stores. Those are two hot topics that he thought would be good to discuss right now, too. Okay, I am done. So there's the list. Where do you want to start?
Here's the problem.
Just to give people a taste of next week.
He sent the link to me, Ed Peruta, at gmail.com, or studio at AM News Network. So if you log into Dropbox using your email,
I can log into them using everything. Didn't you see the chart I did the other day?
Then
I logged into every one of them.
I want to watch you do this.
Well, no, don't.
Okay, well,
do not watch me do it.
Let me tell you,
because that is boring.
Let's go Civilian Review Board. We knew that the Civilian Review Board had a problem. It was ignored. Nobody gave a shit. It wasn't doing anything, and it had no teeth.
How did it first come up on our radar, though?
No, just. I need to say something.
Because why would we care about the Hartford Civilian Review Board?
They had a primary in Hartford yesterday or the day before, whatever, and Luke Bronin, okay, was nominated to represent the Democrats. He was up against Eddie Perez and a couple other people. And standing right in back of Luke Bronin was that woman who took over as chair of the Civilian Review Board and then quit and took off and went and is kind of working with Bronin.
Isn't she on the council? Isn't she a councilwoman?
She's on the council.
Miss Rosado.
She's on the council. That's correct. She's on the council.
I forget her first name.
In other words, yep, she was a Bronin plant.
She was a shill put in there.
On that board.
She was.
Okay?
But the way we got into it was you were being deposed in a case where we sued the city of Hartford because they had prevented you from recording a homicide scene on Park Street in Hartford.
Right.
And during the deposition, you were asked by Corporation Counsel or Counsel for the Officers, I'm not sure which, Corporation Counsel, about certain findings that had been made by the
Civilian Review Board.
Well, it wasn't the Civilian Review Board. It was that Integrative Security Solutions.
Yeah, they had documented my saying something.
And you're like, where'd this come from?
I didn't say that.
And they said, well, it was, they investigated for the board or whatever. And we said, this was in September 2016, and we said, let's go to a board hearing. And we did, and it was the craziest thing.
My case had been tabled.
It was in a room that was so small with like 8 people huddled around a little table in a conference room attached to Hartford Corporation Counsel's office. And the guy in charge, he didn't seem like he knew what he was doing, or he didn't seem like he wanted to have any controversy. And they were just surprised to have anybody there taking any interest. And then when they started talking, and especially Rick Torres, when he started talking about their concerns about the depth of the investigations by their investigators, I thought we should be interested in this because it directly impacted you. But when we learned that they had tabled your complaint because the Hartford City Council, Corporation Counsel's office, had said they should table complaints wherever there's litigation, I said, but that's a conflict. Hartford Corporation Counsel defends the city, and they are meddling, tampering, interfering with an independent review board and saying, if we're being sued on this, you guys just table it and don't do anything about it. Because we all know if the Civilian Review Board had found bad things happened, then it would hurt the City Corporation Counsel's case.
It would be used against the city.
Such a conflict of interest that the Corporation Counsel's office for the city of Hartford was engaged in, and I brought it up and nobody cared. Nobody
still
cared.
Don't care.
They still don't care that attorneys were engaging in this conflict of interest by manipulating an independent board to keep it from finding out bad things about officers where there was litigation pending. How crazy is that? And you bring it to the court's attention, you bring it to people's attention. Again, this is something that government officials should be following up on. Why are you depending on Rachel Baird to bring up these issues? Why isn't the government saying this isn't right, we should do something about that? Why? Because it's the government engaged in the incorrect behavior to begin with. Okay, you got anything to add on that, Ed?
No.
Next subject, and we're going to have some videos because on our way to the Hartford Civilian Review Board meetings back in September 2016, I had a feeling it was going to be a big deal, and so I actually recorded us in the car on our way before we knew what was going to happen. So we have some clips from Ed and I talking about the case and what we expected to happen, and we'll show those next week. Park and Kelsey Street.
You're funny.
Sergeant Barone. You met up with him. Was it September?
No. On Park Street, I met Barone. On Kelsey Street, he wasn't there.
I don't know where my phone is, but it's ringing off the hook, Ed. Go ahead. Don't pay attention to me. I should have turned it off before the show.
I met
I don't know where.
Steve Barone, Officer Barone, on Park Street. Mm-hmm. And Sergeant Spell was on Park Street.
And Sergeant Barone was putting up the Peruta perimeter tape.
The Peruta perimeter tape,
right.
Yeah. Started with a P, police, but Peruta tape. And then there was the Kelsey Street incident, and Barone was not there, but Spell was. But the Civilian Review Board had no concept of police procedure, had no concept of statutory safeguards for the media, had absolutely no concept, no understanding of what happens out on the streets. Nothing. And the lawyer that they had with them would just tell them, and they would just go along with it. Unbelievable.
And was he a deputy chief at the time, Brian Foley? What did he say to you when you went to him on Kelsey Street? And
I went to him on Park Street. And he said, how you doing? I said, I'm not doing well. I said, we need to talk. So what's the problem? I said, I got a problem with one of your officers. He goes, well, you know the drill, file a complaint.
And then he was the public information officer at that time, and then he became
deputy chief.
Well, he may have been both of those.
He was not at the time.
Okay. And then he became
deputy chief.
He retired and worked for Fox News.
And now he's down at the state police as, I guess, one of their public information officers.
Right. And the commissioner of the state police right now is James Ravella.
Yeah.
And we have a tape back there that we're getting ready right now. James Ravella was the Hartford chief of police, and now he's the commissioner of the state police.
Right.
Okay, and he's brought Brian Foley on board with him at the state police. Brian Foley was with him when he was the chief of police in Hartford, right?
Right.
And we deposed Chief of Police James Ravella in the Park Street case about the internal affairs complaint you filed. And we have an excerpt of that video. And the reason I'm going to show this excerpt of the deposition of former Chief of Police James Ravella, who is now the Commissioner of Public Safety of the Connecticut State Police, is because during that deposition, he claimed not to have known what was going on with regard to that internal affairs investigation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I want to juxtapose that to a situation we have going on now with the Connecticut State Police, where, again, he's the commissioner, and I'm betting that he doesn't know what's going on now with regard to letters that the state police firearms unit are sending out to gun owners saying, you're ineligible to possess firearms because it's against the law and it constitutes criminal possession of firearms if you do. And it's not true.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. We had this issue back in 2013.
They wait it out. They wait the public out. They kind of do their dance for a while, and then they fall right back into the groove.
So, and I want to ask Commissioner Ravella, do you want to be embarrassed again at a deposition where you have to answer, I didn't know that, I didn't know that, I didn't know that, and mysteriously look at a document that has your signature on it and say, I didn't know that? Because you should be paying attention to letters that the firearms unit is sending out telling people that they can't possess firearms
What happens
when
is
it's
they
in
have
fact not true.
They have copies of letters with Jim Revilla's signature as chief. And what they do is they use that letterhead and they put their initials in and circle it, saying it's sent out under the authority of the chief, but it's sent out by me, and here's my initials.
Right.
The officers and detectives in the firearms unit are using the chief's name to send out letters.
But if you are the person delegating that kind of authority, now they've been sending, to be fair, they've been sending these letters out for years now.
Right.
But when you come on as the new commissioner, do you or do you not have a duty to make a review of what's been going on? Hire people to assist you and make a review of what's going on. Find things that are wrong. But you know what? They don't want to find things that are wrong that benefit the public. They don't. They want to wait till Rachel Baird brings it up and then change it. That's ridiculous. And when I say Rachel Baird, I mean people like Rachel Baird. It's ridiculous. They should be finding things that are wrong and fixing them themselves, because that's their job, to do things right in accordance with the law.
We can sit here and talk about the state police for the 10 years. We've got 10 years worth of stories with the state police, some of which are absolutely unbelievable. To think that's the Connecticut State Police. They have done a wonderful job of convincing the public that we do no wrong. We are the ethical, the pinnacle of ethics in the Connecticut State Police. Do they wear their uniforms appropriately and sharp and look great? Yeah, they do. But go deeper. Go beyond the uniform. Go beyond the shiny cars. And start looking at what they do and what they shouldn't do.
You can go back to the 1990s in a case that was brought in Connecticut State Court having to do with a declaratory ruling, and somebody was seeking a ruling on assault weapons, and they indicated that we exhausted our administrative remedies, we went to the state police, we asked them for declaratory ruling, and they had no regulations pertaining how to proceed to obtain a declaratory ruling. Now, if you look at the Administrative Procedure Act in Connecticut, it mandates each agency to develop regulations for people to follow in filing petitions for declaratory rulings.
It sets the guidelines for the citizens in how they're to ask, and it sets the guidelines for how the government is supposed to respond. And it sets the guidelines as to what regulations are supposed to be in place to cover requests for declaratory rulings.
So when we requested your declaratory ruling on open carry in Connecticut back in 2008, 2009, 2010, around that time frame, one of you asked for the declaratory ruling yourself in an email. And then when they didn't respond, I picked up the case and I appealed it to the Superior Court, because if they don't respond within 6 months, then you can appeal it because they failed to answer. And by the way, they always fail to answer, which, well, I won't go into that. But in my appeal to the Superior Court from, their failure to respond to your petition for a declaratory ruling on open carry in Connecticut, I put a footnote in there. I said the state police still have no regulations on how to even, still an issue back in the 90s, and they still haven't fixed it. Did the courts care? No. The Superior Court and the Appellate Court did not care that the state police, for at least 15 years, as a matter of record, had failed to develop regulations for people to bring petitions for declaratory rulings. They didn't care. And you know what that led the state police to do? To still not make any regulations. Right?
Because it's approved.
If the law says you're supposed to do something and somebody goes to court and says they're not doing it and the courts say, we don't care,
have to.
then why are you going to follow the law?
Exactly.
And that's the way it is. That's the way it is.
Why, in other words, why should we even have a legislature? You add 1 and 1 and get 2. That's, in my opinion, correct. But let's say I argue the fact that 1 and 1 equals 3, and I take $3 out of the cash register instead of the 2 I'm entitled to, and I go to court and I go, wait a minute, yeah, 1 and 1 is 3, and the courts say let them go because it's okay, don't worry about it. Now that's at the level down here that I'm asking the question about open carry. Now you get into the big questions. And can you take the little responses from the state and say, well, give me the same kind of response you gave me over there? Because I've seen cases come out of the appellate court and the Supreme Court that are in direct conflict with some of the decisions that have been made by the appellate court. They contradict themselves in doing things. And it's absolutely crazy. I don't think that some of the Connecticut appellate court decisions can stand up to federal scrutiny.
I want to tell you, based on a recent experience, which I've long suspected, but you don't come in contact with it that often. When you get a judge on the bench who has actually practiced in a firm, a private firm, and run up against state police, local police in the cases that they've handled, you get a lot different reception when you file motions saying they didn't do this, they should have done this, they need to be told to do this, because anybody who's actually practiced and hasn't been a mouthpiece for the state police, which a lot of judges were in their careers as prosecutors or members of the Attorney General's office, they were defending what the police were doing the whole time. But if you've been on the opposite side and you managed to become a judge, then that is a judge that is a breath of fresh air, because you feel like you're talking to somebody who at least recognizes the issues and recognizes that the police aren't above the law. Because if you know that the police are not following the rules when it comes to adopting regulations or sending out letters that are accurate and aren't threatening people with arrest when there's no reason to, when you see those things, you think to yourself, well, are they cutting corners and not following the law in other respects too? Who cares if they adopt regulations? Well, because it's a sign that they're not following the law in general, that's why. And because they need to adopt regulations so people know how to file petitions. Okay, I'm going to read to you a letter dated September 10th, 2013 from the Connecticut State Police when Reuben Bradford was the commissioner. And this is where I put together the evidence that they sent out a letter to an individual saying that he would be arrested for felony possession of a firearm if he didn't give up his firearms. He gave up his firearms. And because we were in transition at that time with the assault weapon ban, he was never able to get his assault weapons back because he gave up his firearms. So it directly impacted him, and he lost his assault weapons, But even if he hadn't, it was wrong to tell him to give up his firearms when the law didn't say he had to. But if you get a letter from the state police saying we're going to arrest you for felony possession of firearms, most people don't ask questions. They just give them up. But when we brought that to the state police attention, and we didn't get a response right away, that's for sure, it says, rest assured that your concerns were investigated and promptly addressed. It was discovered that correspondence was indeed mistakenly sent to your client, advising him that he was ineligible to possess a firearm when an ex parte restraining order was issued. Fortunately, however, so they admitted that they were wrong when they told him he was ineligible to possess a firearm when an ex parte restraining order was issued. But that's because he hadn't had notice and hearing yet.
But there was no compensation for the loss of his firearms because of the mistake made by the state police.
Nope, there was not. And I can't guarantee 100% that what the police did after this, but Ed, do you think that the police said to themselves, oh my goodness, we've been sending out these incorrect letters. Let's go back and look to make a review of other people we've incorrectly sent letters to. Okay, and let's send letters to them like we did to Attorney Baird saying, oh, we're sorry, we incorrectly sent a letter saying that you had to give up your firearms when you didn't have to. Do you think they did that? Wouldn't that be the honorable thing to do?
Yep.
But I guess because nobody in private practice made them do it, they feel like they didn't have to. They should have done it because it was the right thing to do. You send out a letter with inaccurate information and you're a government official, you fix it. You fix it when it's brought to your attention. You don't just fix it with the one person who knows about it, right?
No, you don't. You collect your paycheck and look forward to retirement.
Those are things that really impact the integrity of the state police.
Well, you wonder why there's people running around angry.
Right.
You wonder why people are upset with government. That's why I enjoy listening to Donald Trump. Because it appears to me that he doesn't play that game.
Have you heard what they're after him for now? Supposedly he said something the other day and he referred to his son as Melania's son. So now they're saying, well, maybe they're like attacking him for saying, oh, that's Melania's son. But they're saying, is it his son? Look at that kid. He looks just like him. What are you talking about? Is that his son or not? He looks just like Donald Trump. And by the way, did you see that recent picture of him? He's like 4 inches taller than Donald Trump.
Who are you talking about?
Barron Trump.
Oh, yeah, Barron.
Yeah. I'm sorry. He's got more than one.
He's
I'm
a
sorry.
Fucking monster.
Right, he is. He's very big. Of course it's Donald Trump's son. But every little thing he says, it's like they are obsessed. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of people like a stalker, in court when, especially people in previous relationships, when you go to court and you're saying, this person is stalking me, I need some kind of restraining order against them because everything I do, it's like the media is stalking, obsessed with Donald Trump. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing how obsessed they are with him. Okay. J.C. Playford's case. Well, you have not, as everybody knows, J.C. Playford and I did a show, I think it was August 3rd. We discussed the status of his case. We read the decision from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Terrible, terrible, terrible decision. And J.C. wants me to file a petition for cert with the Supreme Court. And we're looking at that. So that's the status of J.C. Playford's case. We would like, the Stanford litigation clinic, the First Amendment litigation clinic there to come on board and help. And I'm going to contact him again. We wanted him to help us previously. We didn't get a response. But this decision, it has such a big impact. And, Justice Ginsburg and Justice Sotomayor couldn't have said it better in the Avis versus Bartlett. Whether there's probable cause, well, Justice Sotomayor said whether there's probable cause or not should not matter when somebody is being arrested in retaliation for the exercise of their First Amendment rights. And Justice Ginsburg said this is a terrible case in the Avis versus Bartlett to even decide this issue because it's going to impact the media, and the facts in the Avis versus Bartlett didn't have anything to do with the media, but the terrible decision in that case, with a limited carve out where you can sue when there's probable, for when there's probable cause, when you have the right to sue for retaliation. It's just terrible. So that's what we're doing with that case. Do we have the video up? We're going to show the video of Commissioner Ravella of this Connecticut State Police when he was the chief of police for the Hartford Police Department. So back on the record, Previously, we had marked a document as Exhibit 20. It has citizen complaint form on it. I, during the break, obtained another citizen complaint form that appears to be much more complete that we've previously used in this case as an exhibit. And we can just mark it as the next exhibit to, keep the record
So what is that?
straight instead of, replacing Exhibit 20. We'll just leave Exhibit 20 as it is, and then this will be the next exhibit.
Which is 31?
Yes.
There you go.
This one, correct?
Correct.
Like me to give it to the lawyer?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, have you, seen Exhibit 31 previously, or part of it, or none of it?
Yes,
When did this complaint form first come to your visual attention?
this would have been in the IED case file.
So from your previous testimony, that would mean that approximately a week or so before the April 9th, 2015 letter went out, you would have reviewed that case file? And that
Yes,
would be Exhibit 23 if you need to
Yes.
refer to it.
and followed by the April 23rd letter, yes.
Yes, that's Exhibit 24.
Correct.
Going back to Exhibit 22, the memorandum,
Yes,
on the last page of the memorandum where we already discussed the exoneration on the charge of discourteous attitude, I'd like to direct your attention to that. And then if you could look at Exhibit 31, the complaint form, 5 pages in.
does it begin with description of incident?
It does.
Okay.
Now you're aware that under the Hartford ordinance, 2-196, there are a list of various reasons under which, or various complaints under which internal affairs complaint can be filed, right?
Objection form.
Yes,
And obviously one of them is discourteous attitude, right?
yes,
On that page that we're examining in Exhibit 31, that begins with description of the incident. Were you aware in reviewing the file that Mr. Pruda had made a complaint that his civil rights were violated on September 12, 2014?
I actually didn't pick up on that when I
And
read it.
And in the memo that's Exhibit 22, is there any finding with regard to a civil rights violation complaint filed by Mr. Pruda?
There is not.
And harassment, were you aware that Mr. Pruda had alleged harassment from the September 12, 2014 incident?
I did miss that, no.
And in the memo, Exhibit 22, is there any finding with regard to harassment?
No.
Now, is unbecoming an officer different from a claim of discourteous attitude?
Objection form.
Yes.
And were you aware that Mr. Pruda had made a complaint of conduct unbecoming an officer?
No.
And am I correct that there's no finding on that claim in Exhibit 22?
That's correct.
And your letter dated April 23rd, 2015, which is Exhibit 24, just mentions discourteous attitude, correct?
Objection form.
Yes.
And going back to Exhibit 31, the threatening arrest of the complainant, were you aware that Mr. Pruda had made a claim that he had been threatened with arrest?
Objection form.
No.
And I'm talking about the September 12th, 2014 incident.
Objection form.
No.
And in Exhibit 22, was there any finding made with regard to a claim by Mr. Pruda that he was threatened with arrest on September 12th, 2014?
No.
Do you know why Exhibit 22 would not have included findings with regard to Mr. Pruda's allegations of conduct unbecoming an officer, harassment, threatening arrest, and civil rights violations?
Objection form.
No. You're claiming this is finding, correct?
Excuse me?
In your questions, you mentioned the finding.
Yeah, right.
Right.
At the end. Now, I could follow up and ask you, do you see parts in Exhibit 22 where those allegations are referenced?
Yes.
And where are those located?
Objection, the document speaks for itself.
On page 2. The
All right, we're back.
paragraph.
Now, basically what that showed was the chief of police ultimately signed off on an internal affairs report, a written report, and in some cases exonerated the officers. And when questioned under oath and asked, did you know that Mr. Pruda made a complaint about this? No, I must have missed that. Do you know Mr. Pruda made a complaint about this? No, I must have missed that also. In other words, he did not do a proper review of the internal affairs complaint or the process that got it to his desk.
Let me be the devil's advocate and say, well, he's the chief of a large metropolitan police department, capital of Connecticut. He has a lot of things going on. He delegated his authority. He can't know everything. I have a response to that myself, but I'll listen to you. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah.
What is your response?
Take the people in internal affairs and put them out on the road catching bad guys. Disband the civilian review board because they're useless as tits on a bull. And that's it.
Okay, well, my response to this, former Chief Ravella, you may be able to claim that in Ed's case. But on the other hand, when Sergeant Barone, I'll say Officer Barone, when Officer Barone was involved in the Flatbush incident, where he drove up on a scene, Well, first of all, when he stopped the person, he turned his camera off. And then when the person fled and he engaged in pursuit and it turned into a melee with a lot of officers involved. And when he drove up, he turned his dash cam off again and blamed it on muscle memory when asked by Internal Affairs why he did that. Somehow Chief Rovella was able to focus on that Internal Affairs complaint. He was able to focus on it so much that he reviewed the IA report and decided not to hold Officer Barone accountable for everything that the IA had recommended. And then Officer Barone had been on the sergeant's list for a period of time, and Chief Rovella was able to focus on that one individual in his department to be able to bring him into his office after the other new sergeants had been promoted in a public ceremony that was in the newspaper and attended by many people. But later on, when Chief Rovella had already announced his intent to retire, he was a lame duck. He brought Sergeant Barone into his office and promoted him in a private ceremony. So I don't buy the argument that he's the head of a large police department. He has a lot of concerns and he should delegate authority, because when it's important to him, like it was to slide Sergeant Barone through the process in a sneaky sort of way, he reviewed his IA report. He paid attention to Sergeant Barone, and if he can pay that much attention to that one officer in that one particular circumstance, he could have paid attention to your IA complaint. So I'm not buying that excuse that he was too busy to pay attention to everything. And by the way, Sergeant Barone, you may recognize him because later on, after Chief Rovella left the department, Sergeant Barone was secretly recorded by some kids or young people, and in that recording he said he was trigger happy and some other things, which ultimately
cost him his job.
Right. So this guy,
and we had said he shouldn't have been on the job before he lost his job,
because he shouldn't be turning his camera on and off as a matter of muscle memory. That's nuts. What are you trying to hide? Well, obviously, we know what he was trying to hide, because when he was secretly recorded, it resulted in video that led to his resignation. So anyway, the VA. We're gonna spend our last moments talking about a recent decision in the I'm trying to think. U.S. Court, a divided 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims on Tuesday said that the VA's current reimbursement regulation for veterans who seek non-department medical care violates existing federal law. This is a case where the court ordered the VA to cover veterans' emergency room deaths. We're going to get more into this case, and I want to discuss this next week.
At the VFW.
At the VFW, that's right. It should be our lead-off subject at the VFW next week.
Right, and I think that I should ask the Post to ask as many members as possible to attend.
That's right.
Because we can also discuss other aspects of veterans' benefits.
Right, because you have a situation going on right now. Anybody who's been watching our show for the last 5 years, we've gone back and forth on how much attention we've devoted to Ed's VA situation, but Ed got a groundbreaking, precedent-setting decision from the BVA, the Board of Veterans Appeals.
Back in 2014.
That April 4th, 2014. I remember it. We had gone down to Washington like a year and a half prior to that, I think, on an appeal, and the BVA ruled that you did not have to go to the VA for any care whatsoever, and you would be reimbursed or paid for any services you received outside the VA. Correct?
The VA was ordered to pay for all medical conditions outside of the VA facilities because of the way I had been treated and incidents that had occurred since 1970.
Because you had lost trust.
I had lost trust. I didn't have any more trust in the VA.
And there was a reasonable basis, the court ruled, for that loss of trust.
Yes.
One among the many reasons, you unearthed emails from 2002 involving a doctor, a nurse, an administrative personnel talking about you. This was right after your heart attack.
How much money I was going to cost them as I aged.
Right, exactly. And
the rubber has now hit the road.
yeah, and just to update everybody, in the past month and a half, I've received 4 notices from the VA saying they're not going to cover your medical cost of certain claims have been put in. They're saying they're not going to cover it and that you have the right to appeal. Well, I got news for you. We already appealed. It was a 5-year process, and we have a decision, and the VA is not following a decision by the BVA.
I think that we need to appeal, and we need to simply say, Exhibit A are the unpaid bills. Exhibit A is the decision of 14. Exhibit B are the unpaid bills and the collection notices, and a simple statement: the VA is not abiding by the decision of April 4th, 2014.
So there's a regulation as well in a VA reg and a statute that says if you receive treatment from the VA, and you're the expert on this, I'm going to defer to you if I need correction. If you need treatment from the VA and you get that treatment either inside or outside the VA, if you have third-party insurance, then they're on the hook somewhat, correct?
Third-party insurance?
Like Aetna or...
Okay.
You know what I mean. Come on.
In most cases,
Right.
the VA has the right to bill your private insurance.
Right.
But if it's a service-connected issue,
There you go.
the VA must pay it out of their pocket.
Okay.
And when a person is 100% service-connected, permanent and total, that means that the VA owns me from the longest hair on the top of my head till the tip of my toenails and everything in between.
Got it.
Eyes, teeth, everything. That I'm entitled, they don't have to sit there and say, well, you didn't have any leg issues, you didn't have any arm issues. No, the VA owns my entire body when I'm 100% permanent and total. They own my entire body.
But let's get back to somebody who's not 100%, right? And they go to the VA for a non-service connected issue, and the VA helps them.
Right.
Now, the third-party insurance can be billed for that, correct?
That's correct.
But the regulation says that Medicare cannot. Medicare is
Medicare
not
cannot.
considered a third-party insurer. So if you go to the VA and you're on Medicare and they treat you for a non-service connected disability, the VA cannot then bill Medicare.
Right.
Right. Now, you, not only are you 100%, so they're responsible for everything. So there's not even a gray issue of whether Medicare should be being billed. It should not, under any circumstances, in your case, be billed.
And now understand something. The VA created the scenarios where the hospitals and doctors billed Medicare. By not paying my bills, the VA not paying my bills, the providers then went to Medicare because they were told, no, this isn't covered, we're not covering this. And the doctors, wanting to get paid, hospitals, they sent it to Medicare. And they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing.
And so what did I do to try to address this blatant Medicare fraud?
You filed a claim with the federal government.
A False Claims Act claim. I said that the Veterans Administration was conspiring, participating in a scheme to have Medicare pay the bills that the VA should have been paying.
That's correct.
I know everybody out there saying to themselves, well, my God, look at all the attention that the U.S. Attorney's Office has put into Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman about, a scam with getting kids into college and USC. My God, they must have rallied the troops when they heard about the Medicare fraud that the VA was engaging in when Attorney Baird filed that complaint. They must have been beside themselves. Well, you're wrong. Nobody cared. Nobody cared in the U.S. Attorney's Office that there was Medicare fraud going on. You know what their response was? a standing issue. In other words, you can't say that one government agency, you can't say that a government agency is improperly billing the government. So you have no relief. You have no relief. So what did that mean for the VA? That meant that the VA could continue engaging in the same conduct that has resulted in, up to this moment, Medicare fraud. And nobody is willing to fix the problem. Nobody. So it
That's
just
correct.
goes on. It just goes on.
And this is a topic for next Saturday.
Okay. So you ready to wind it up, Ed?
I think I need to widen it up.
You did great. Okay. So we
Okay.
will see you next Saturday. It's a big day. Whatever happens is fine.
And I think that the closing is going to come on now. Have a great week.